Hello, I'm Dan from Illuminauts, and this is a Lorcana lore deep dive where we're going to take a trip into the Great Illuminary and into the Inklands to find out what has been going on. So this is the Grand Illuminary, this floating sphere in the sky is where most of the story takes place. This was created by the curator a long time ago, and he invited many Illumineers to here to fill out the world with different glimmers. They have since all disappeared. We don't know why or what has happened. The Grand Illuminary though has these things called lore books, and these books allow us to create our glimmer. But in general, this is like one of the main areas that we see in trailers. When we first get introduced to this character, we don't know who this is. A lot of people think it could be a young Shanzei, which we'll get onto in a second. But essentially, we see them here harnessing the ink and story stars to create a Wayward Sorcerer Mickey. Outside, things seem to be going wrong. We don't know if this is the past or if this is the present, but certainly that things are not as they should be. This is probably a good time to talk about the Illumineers. So here we have Shanzei in the middle, who again could be an older version of the young girl that we see at the start. It could be that she got sent home and for whatever reason, maybe the darkness won. She got sent back home, grew up, forgot all about the world of Lorcana, and is now being reintroduced to it. On the left of the screen, we have Martin. They are a key component in creating the Floodborn and Venturo. Each one of these has a particular ink associated with them. Shanzei's inks seem to be steel and amethyst. Martin's seem to be emerald and amber, and Venturo's seem to be sapphire and ruby. You can see these on the two little harnesses. With the gang introduced, these all seem to be creative individuals. Martin has a guitar for an ink caster, for example. Shanzei's resembles a pen. And we see here that she is some sort of poet. She steps outside and we see the Lorcana symbol. This seems to be a way of transporting our Illumineers into the Grand Illuminary. When she steps on it, she does get sent there, and when she wakes up in the Grand Hall, we see just behind her a suspicious looking mural with a flood on it, which I'm sure is not going to be important at all. She then wanders into one of the main rooms and we see one of the machines. This is the machine that harnesses story stars. So that's the light that is flowing into it at the moment. That light then travels into one of the other rooms, which we saw in the first little trailer, and swirls around the lore book. We have Shanzei's ink caster in here, and we can see the mechanism starts to fill up. It seems that the story stars kind of draw the picture in the lore book of the glimmer, and then the ink is with the ink caster is what actually brings it to life. So we see the story star filling in a little outline of Herc. Shanzei taps it with her ink caster, and the steel ink brings him out of the book. This is just an in-depth look at how we actually get our glimmers, and this is how the world is filled. We then get a shot of the gang looking a little bit nervous, as we can see lots and lots of energy pouring into the lore book. This might be how lots of the other glimmers have been made, such as this Mickey Mouse who's greeting other people to the Illuminary. Elsewhere in the Grand Illuminary, we see this particular chamber with all of this dark, inky stuff. This is a trailer for the Floodborn, and it's not the first time that we've seen this inky seaweed, as this was actually on a couple of cards from set 1. The Mickey Mouse Detective and the Duke of Vesselton, and we can see some of the seaweed in both of their cards. As we know now, Ursula is behind this book and leaving her seaweed everywhere. What we don't know is if she was actually sealed within it. It seems though that with the glowing of Martin's eyes here, that there's a good chance that he was also entangled, and the fact that he is a musician kind of goes with the Ursula vibe as well. We see them unlock the book, some tentacles pop out, and ink starts to flood the Grand Illuminary. This is the ink that creates the Floodborn, which seems to be a new phenomenon, judging by Venturo's face here, as Cinderella gets swept up and turns into the stout-hearted version. We see the flood then wash through the Grand Illuminary and wash away a bunch of different lore. Here we have King Triton's trident, we have Peter Pan's dagger, Ratigan's dinner bell, and the coconuts from Moana. This washes the items of lore out into the hallways and ultimately out into the Inklands. As these items come flooding down the hallway, Martin reaches for the trident and decides not to catch it as they see their friend. They pull Ventura out and they stumble backwards to see that the ink is flooding out and into the Inklands, which transforms it all and changes it. So now our Illuminary has got a little bit of a leaky problem, and we can head into the Inklands. Here we see the Sumerian Talisman. Good shout out for DuckTales fans, we'll get back on that. Ventura's created the Elorian Gyro Sensor, and these things floating behind are ink runners. They come in two different sizes. These seem to be bigger ones that you can climb in and pilot, which we see now with a few new glimmers for into the Inklands. The Aurelian Gyro Sensor works by finding hidden pieces of lore. So we're setting off to basically find these different things. The fact that these are flying machines seems important. As we can see here, there's ink on the ground, which seems to be kind of making a swampy environment, and it seems to have changed a lot of the different areas. Tinkerbell flies off over some ink and finds the trident and does a little symbol for us, but Ventura is like, nah, I'm gonna go this way. Ventura decides to follow the sensor though and goes for the dime instead. Well done, team, again. Could have prevented something there, but oh well, better luck next time. And then we see a shadowy hand take the trident away. To jump back to those DuckTales fans, this is the hand of none other than Magica Dispel, or at least her shadow form. We do know that Magica does become entangled by Ursula and probably used to retrieve the trident here. It seems though, after the fallout of Ursula's return, that she might still be up to no good and after the trident for herself. Yes, Herc. Elsewhere in the Inklands, we see a shadowy figure in this cave, and yes, we see the hidden Mickey. Thank you, Lorcana. This is obviously no other than Bruno, but hang on, what is this around Bruno? Why is the seaweed again? This was our first true confirmation of the glimmers being entangled by Ursula. Bruno here has a vision of the two Ursulas fighting and sees the Illumineers arriving at Ursula's lair, ready to fight them. The lair, it's important to note, was actually teased back in Inklands. We see it here in the background with the Jolly Roger card. A hero steps forward to challenge Ursula and are surrounded by what seems to be glimmers. In Lorcana though, no hero or character will actually betray their core characteristics, so let's keep that in mind for later. So we see Bruno and, oh my, Oswald, is that Minnie and Eric? Eric here literally drove into the edge of the storm and got captured and became Ursula's groom. He is actually a Floodborn version here, which we'll see a little pattern developing with that. In terms of Minnie, again, seems surprising, but she is just entangled, so she's not actually betraying herself. This is a Floodborn Minnie as well. We see her in set 2 diving, and she finds this cave, which she unfortunately enters, and yeah, does not go so well for Minnie there. Other characters also get captured. We see Anna, and this has a whole storyline to itself. So Hans decides to steal Kristoff's hat, Olaf finds the hat, and then Anna sets off, and yeah. And we see the gang completely surrounded when all of a sudden a giant Ursula Glimmer bursts forth wearing the Hexwell crown, which we don't actually know where this comes from, and wielding the trident. These two in combination with possibly the flood ink seems to have morphed Ursula into this big form. It's important to talk about the title Ursula's Return briefly here, because where has she returned from seems to be the question. We don't get an official confirmation within any of the lore or even the Illumineers quest, but it seems that she has either returned from the sealed lore book. Maybe she is the person that caused all the trouble in the past. Martin released her back into the Inklands and caused all of this. It's not very clear. There's lots of other stories that have actually gone on during this time period. So the Illuminary itself is still pouring out ink, and people seem to have gone on their own little adventures. We have Ariel, who has many unique things in her grotto, including what seems to be a projector, which may have some sort of map on it. Ariel and Flounder decide to go off and have some adventures, which involves them getting chased by the shark, who we see in the background first. But then Flounder himself actually finds something, and what he finds is the hidden cove harboring an old Inkcaster. The Inkcaster could be a leftover or a hidden item from the Curator or one of the original Illumineers. Also in this set we see sphere cards. The sphere cards seem to be actual ink encased in some sort of sphere. Again, we don't know if these were created by the curator, if they're created by Venturo, but they do seem more like relics of the past in a similar vein to the actual ink caster that we see Ariel wielding. And there could be other characters that end up wielding this in future sets. With the defeat of Ursula though, it's party time in the Inklands, which does this kind of mean that a lot of the ink has dried up? Because this is taking place over a big area. Everyone is celebrating though when suddenly a piece of the Illuminary crashes to the ground. It went from this to this, which, you know, something definitely is not good here. There's lots of things dropping from it. We still see ink pouring out. It's just generally not looking too healthy. And Merlin Glimmer has a vision about a new artifact that can save the Illuminary though. It's not mentioned in the trailer, but in the card, Vision of the Future, he sees all of the Chromacons. Some of them aren't necessarily specifically like what the art ends up being like, the amber one being the main focus here, but he does mention that the Chromacons are needed to fix the Illuminary before it's too late. Amber obviously having good healing properties, but somehow the power of all of these is going to combine together. I think it's also interesting that the Chromacons seem to be more imbued with the energy, so possibly from the story stars than the actual ink. Merlin though seems to decide that this is the best way to fix the Illuminary, and so ends up sending the Illumineers and their Glimmers off on a quest to find these different Chromacons. This leads us back into the Illuminary, where we see Basil, who, hold on, he's hypnotized, isn't he? Yep, we see this in Hypnotic Deduction, and we get a little hint of him working for him, which can only be Jafar, given his new form, Tyrannical Hypnotist. And he says, no one will keep me from the broken crown. So it seems that Jafar here is definitely intent on getting this crown. We don't have a Basil card in the same outfit as this either, so expect an Emerald Basil soon. Martin, of course, is them, and Basil find a secret staircase which distracts the Kronk Glimmer standing guard of the broken Hexwell crown. Down here, the two find the Amber Chromacon before dun dun dun. A mysterious shadow looms over the Hexwell crown, clearly having snuck past Sleepy, which, I mean, who put him on guard duty, seriously? Everyone goes back to party down in the Inklands, which raises an interesting point. This stage, and the one depicted here, are not the same. It's clearly more of a structure than a tent, but we also have these two very clearly not modern day looking people. Could this be a curator and an Illumineer? It's also worth noting that the classification says ballroom as in a room inside the Illuminary, but our party is taking place outside. So, what does the future hold under these shimmering skies? Well, it's clear that the Hexwell crown is going to be a very important piece of Lorcana lore for some time still. A few villains seem to be after it. A number of people think Hades is potentially our new main villain because of the flavor text on his card from set 4, but this might just be Hades being Hades and going after Olympus. The Queen is another good contender. We see this from her willingly wading into a river of ink, and given the classification similarities, it feels safe to assume that she becomes the fairest of all. We do see a gathering of queens during Shimmering Skies, and we have Diviner, Commanding Presence, and Hateful Rival with the Storyborn Queen. Will they be working together though, or will they be betrayed by the fairest of all? Will they work together to become some giant apple witch? Who knows, but the skies are certainly full of promise, or maybe that's the azure I'd see. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There's definitely a few other stories running between different cards, so let me know if you'd like a video on those as well, and I will get that popped together. But thanks for watching, have a magical week, and we'll see you real soon. Timing here.